Hi, I'm Hadari P.T. Brown. I'm coming to you to talk to you about early voting and the reason why it's so important, as well as voting in general. So many times we think about voting in a in a way that doesn't seem so good, but the reality is there will always be lines, regardless if you early vote or not, or if you absentee vote. Absentee vote is not really about a line, unless you go into the city clerk's office and get an absentee ballot. Then you might see lines. But no matter if you early vote in terms of going to a voting precinct, because most states have early voting, or if you go on election day and just go vote, you still don't run into the factor of lines. We can't solve the woes of our election process. The only way we can solve it is not by continuing to do studies, but to really understand the makeup of elections. When it comes down to it, our city clerks and our Secretary of State's offices, at the end of the day, what they decide, they budget for how many polling booths they can afford to put out there in different precincts and locations based on how many people voted in the previous election or, or the previous presidential or mayoral election. That's how they budget for how many voting booths they have for different precincts. And then sometimes things become political, just like what happened in Ohio and Florida, as we know. But those things are not nothing new. It's just the fact that those elections were so close that they got heightened security and concern about voting became about. But voting has always been an issue in America, and we have to understand that election fraud and voting fraud will not be solved overnight, but we have to put mechanisms in place to solve these woes and these issues, and to take the bureaucracy and political sides and the political realization of these things out of the hands of our politicians, who all they care about is winning elections anyway. Elections are appointed and they are fundamentals of a democracy. So what we have to understand, people, we got to come up with ways of how we can lessen the burden of people and educate the people on the real voting woes and sentiments of everyone. We need to make sure everybody registered to vote. We need to make sure everybody can vote. But we need to make sure it's done right and it's done in a justified way that doesn't lead to election fraud, that doesn't lead to a stealing of election, and doesn't discriminate from anyone from voting unless they did not do the proper paperwork and are not doing the proper things to be where they need to be to vote. We need to make sure every vote is counted, every voice is heard. But there's certain mechanisms that need to be put in place to make this happen. We got tons of laws dealing with election and voting, but the reality is all these laws and all these things that we have on the books are not working. As we can see, no matter who gets elected, can we truly say that the voting system we have in America is truly democratic when we don't even know who's counting the votes, how the votes are being counted, when we're using computers and other mechanisms? So the reality is, people, we got to find a better way for our voting systems in America. We got to find a better way for our election system in America so it can be a democracy. I'm Hadari P.T. Brown, and this is my perspective.